May I please request the chairpersons on the stage, please? Dr. Sharada Devi, Dr. K. Radha Kumari ma'am, Dr. Sujata TL, Dr. P.V. Aisha. May I please request the chairpersons to be on the stage, please? Dr. K. Radha Kumari ma'am, Dr. Sujata TL, Dr. P.V. Aisha. Following this engaging debate, we will now move on to the pre-Congress oration entitled Management of Menopause. This presentation, delivered by Dr. Lakshmi C. Seshadri, guarantees to provide valuable insights and the latest advancements in menopausal management. Without further ado, let's extend a warm welcome to Dr. Lakshmi Seshadri as she takes the stage. Let's extend a warm welcome to Dr. Lakshmi Seshadri as she takes the stage. We request the chairpersons to hand over the medal to Lakshmi Seshadri ma'am. We will now move on to our pre-Congress oration entitled Management of Menopause. Over to you, ma'am.
Good evening to all of you. I can see that it is really the end of the day after a day-long tiring session for all of you. So I shall keep it to the point and short. Is that pointer working? Okay. Okay, okay. And this is forward, is it? Okay. This advances conference has been going on for several years now. It's an academic feast that is organized by Dr. Jayakrishnan and his colleagues. And year after year, we have been here and all of us have benefited from the various sessions by eminent teachers. There have been several pre-Congress orations in the past, and I think mine is the 6th one, and you had eminent speakers like Dr. Shankaranarayanan, Professor Ajay Rane and others. I am proud, happy and privileged to be invited to deliver this oration today. Now, the topic that I have chosen is management of the menopausal women. Where goeth we? I'm asking you this question because none of us seem to know the answer, neither the patient nor the caregivers. Basically because there have been a lot of conflicting and contradicting information that we have been given over a period of several years. Now, I will begin with the definition of menopause. Yes, it is a cessation of menstruation for more than 12 months. All of us know that. I don't think you need anyone to tell you that. But then in the current scenario, where many women have an intrauterine device, Mirena, or have had an endometrial ablation done, the cessation of menstruation, you don't know when it happens. And therefore, in the current scenario, this is more appropriately defined as permanent cessation of ovarian function that occurs in women on an average between the ages of 45 and 55 years. Remember, it occurs at an age when many women are in paid employment because the retirement age is now 55, 60, 65, 70. They're all still working. And also women have diverse roles in the sense they could have their college-going children, they could have their children married, in which case they have to take care of their delivery, their neonates, they also need to take care of the aging parents, aging in-laws. And so they have innumerable responsibilities that they need to carry out, and therefore impact of menopause extends way beyond the affected individual. So what is the magnitude of the problem? The global population of postmenopausal women is growing, and it was in 2011 it was 22%, and now it's 26% in 2021, and women are living longer, like Dr. Paili said. And a woman of 60 years is expected to live on an average for another 20-21 years, and a third of a woman's life is spent in the postmenopausal period. And globally, the mean age is 48.8 years. There are a few studies which may say that the average age is different in India, but they're not very robust studies. And again, it's between 46 and 47. And of course, Indian Menopause Society has defined early menopause, delayed menopause, and also premature menopause, which all of us know. But what I want to stress upon is that the most important event is a failure of ovarian function, as I said earlier, and ovarian production. And the cause of most symptoms and pathological changes is a drop in the estrogen level. Now, what are the effects? I'm sure even an undergraduate student knows vasomotor symptoms. 60 to 80% of women are supposed to have it, but remember only less than 10% experience moderate to severe symptoms. And Asian women actually have myalgia and arthralgia rather than hot flushes. How many of the ammachis who come to you tell you that they have hot flushes? They always tell you it's paining here and paining there, not knowing that all these are symptoms of menopause. And moreover, it is associated with impaired psychological and general well-being. Of course, vulvovaginal atrophy will cause vaginal and urinary symptoms, which I don't have to elaborate upon. Women may or may not also complain of a whole lot of other problems which are also the effect of estrogen deficiency, namely impaired cognition, dementia. All of us like to say, I don't remember the name, I've forgotten. She was my student, I don't know what is happening. I remember the name of this drug, now I can't remember. All these are happening to us day after day. And there is impairment of verbal learning and memory, central adipose tissue accumulation, and increase in the total body adipose tissue. There are skin changes, increased aging and wrinkling of the skin, and there's impaired balance, which may contribute to a fall and forearm fracture. We all need to know that all these are because of estrogen deficiency. Now, there are more subtle changes with more serious effects, and which is what I want all of you to focus on. Vasomotor symptoms won't kill, genitourinary symptoms won't kill, but what can actually cause serious morbidity or mortality are these effects. The estrogens protect against cardiovascular disease during reproductive years, and there's an epidemiological shift in the prevalence of this problem in the menopausal period. There's an alarming increase in the rate of cardiovascular disease in women in midlife, and higher in women with the low socioeconomic status and those who come from the low-income countries. The rates are higher in women with history of premature ovarian insufficiency, gestational diabetes, gestational hypertension, etc. Now, why is there an increase in the cardiovascular disease? It's because there is decline in BMR, there are changes in lipids, there's change in insulin resistance and glucose metabolism, there's changes in fat distribution, decrease in muscle mass and sarcopenia, endothelial dysfunction, increase in carotid intima media thickness and vascular structural abnormalities. This figure very simply explains this. Suffice it to know that there are a whole lot of things that are happening in the woman's body, all because of estrogen deficiency, including adipose tissue, fatty liver, insulin resistance, etc., all of which contribute to what is called a cardiometabolic effect of estrogen depletion at menopause. And this is something that we have to be aware of and focus on. Now, the multi-system problems are contributed to or caused by decrease in the estrogen, which in turn lead to increase in the energy intake and decrease in the expenditure, increase in visceral fat, insulin resistance, all together lead to endothelial dysfunction and a cardiometabolic risk. Now, in the absence of estrogen, atherosclerotic plaque is held down more rapidly. Cardiometabolic risk increases 10 years earlier in women after the age 60 compared to men, and these effects begin at menopause but take 10 to 15 years to manifest, and estrogen therapy soon after menopause can reinstate the protective action. That is the bottom line. Years after menopause, on the other hand, the estrogen action on the endothelium is no longer possible, and the problem is more pronounced in women who have an early menopause. Hence, the timing hypothesis or a window of opportunity, which I will explain later. So look at this plaque. This atherosclerotic plaque is formed in the early years, and at this point in time, immediately after menopause, estrogen has a positive action and can reverse it. Years after menopause, there is already a necrotic center which is enlarging, and estrogen here actually has deleterious effects, including plaque instability, and therefore works in the opposite way, and therefore it has to be given early if at all. The other thing to remember is that women with troublesome vasomotor symptoms are at higher risk of hypertension and cardiovascular disease, and therefore actually it helps you to choose. If a woman has hot flushes, remember that she is at a higher risk, and therefore it may be an indication to start her on treatment to protect cardiovascular problem. Increase in severity of hot flushes actually increase the risk, and sleep disorder also increase the risk of coronary heart disease. Now, how does this vasomotor symptom cause a problem? Please remember, vasomotor symptoms occur in women who also have other risk factors for cardiovascular disease, and together they cause endothelial dysfunction, atherosclerosis, metabolic syndrome, and cardiovascular disease. There are other factors in the obstetric and gynecological history which also increase the risk, namely functional hypothalamic amenorrhea, polycystic ovarian syndrome, history of infertility and miscarriage, pregnancy-induced hypertension and gestational diabetes, early menopause, and premature ovarian insufficiency. There are a whole lot of things that contribute to the woman's problem. The other silent killer or the cause of morbidity and disability is osteoporosis, and that we really cannot forget. Accelerated bone resorption that exceeds bone formation is osteoporosis. The drop in estrogen levels stimulate the osteoclasts and causes all this. Remember, bone loss commences 2 years before menopause, peaks 2 years after menopause, and BMD decreases by 6% in the lumbar spine and 5% in the femoral neck during the menopausal transition. And estrogen is the best known treatment to prevent bone loss. Hence, a woman who comes to you at say 45 or 48 years of age, symptomatic or asymptomatic, is not the same as a woman who comes to you at say 25 or 35 with abnormal uterine bleeding or any other symptom, because this lady who has come to you at 45 is at the threshold of a new phase of her life. She has 1/3 of her life ahead of her with distressing symptoms, changes in her appearance, high risk for cardiometabolic disease, and high risk for osteoporosis. And she has 20 or more years of career, many more years of family responsibility. So it is our responsibility to manage her and manage her well. Therefore, perimenopausal care plays an important role in the promotion of healthy aging and quality of life. So what should we be doing? What should we do? Holistic care needs to be the answer. And when delivering the holistic care, remember physical functioning, psychological well-being, social relationships which may all be affected by the menopause-related issues and sexual problems, economic issues which again may be menopause-related or menopause-independent, but all of them need to be taken care of. So you have a woman here who has got problems of menopause and aging. She may be symptomatic or asymptomatic, doesn't matter, but we need to focus on preventive health, not only the treatment of symptoms. They will go away. Now where do we start? So if you need to prevent cardiometabolic risk and also osteoporosis and other morbidity, we need to begin with evaluation. Lifestyle and environmental factors must be looked into. Prior health and reproductive history, I've again highlighted obstetric and other problems, family history of cancers, cardiovascular disease, osteoporosis, and clinical examination. This can be done by anybody. It need not be a gynecologist. The woman might go to an orthopedician for a back pain. She could go to a dermatologist. She could go to somebody for a hypertension. It is the onus is on the physicians or the doctors of all specialty to understand and realize and remember that this woman at the threshold of menopause, whatever be the problem for which she has come, has to have this entire evaluation and a referral to a person who is experienced and is an expert in managing the problems of menopause, because preventive maintenance is what we are talking about now and not symptomatic management. Management begins with lifestyle modification, weight optimization, exercises, calcium supplementation, vitamin D supplementation. I'm not elaborating on the supplementations. Diet, all of us know, high intake of fruit, vegetables, low consumption of red and processed meat, exercises, aerobic and muscle strengthening, etc. And other behavioral modifications like stopping smoking and adequate sleep. These are all essential parts of menopausal management. Now, dietary interventions help help in controlling sugars, prevent or delay onset of diabetes. Physical activity improves cardiac pump function, increases stroke volume and lowers the heart rate. And medications should be used as and when required, lipid lowering agents, management of diabetes, hypertension, and even weight reducing agents if the woman is morbidly obese. Now, when it comes to management of her symptoms, for the usual symptoms of menopause, like mood swings and vasomotor symptoms, we knew that menopausal hormone therapy was considered the best and only option for several years. So then what happened? What happened was that in 2002, what felt like a bomb dropped on the entire womankind. The US federal governments halted the hormone replacement trial, that is the WHI trial. This was followed by 2 decades of conflicting, frightening and confusing information, and as a result, several deserving women have been deprived of the much deserved, much needed hormone therapy. Now, in 2016, the WHI group apologized, but despite accumulating evidence and widespread support, several studies, randomized, observational, Cochrane reviews, we haven't changed. Because in our mind, hormone therapy is breast cancer, hormone therapy is heart attack, and therefore the mindset has not changed. And why is it so? It is because we are all worried about a risk of cardiovascular disease, risk of breast cancer, risk of thromboembolism and stroke, and risk of mortality. So let's look at all this. Now, most important observation that has emerged subsequently after reanalysis of the WHO data and several other studies, including Cochrane review, is that the effects of menopausal hormone therapy on all these is modified by age and years since menopause. This is one thing that we all need to remember. If you look at this, you can see that if you stratify by age, the group which is 50 to 59 years definitely has a less risk, irrespective of whether they take estrogen alone or a combination, including all-cause total mortality, stroke, and cardiovascular disease. Now, if you stratify by years since menopause, those who have had those who are 10 years since menopause definitely have a decrease in risk as compared to those who have had menopause 10, 20 years ago or 30 years ago. So, when you look at all the evidence of menopausal hormone therapy and coronary vascular disease, estrogen therapy has no adverse effect on cardiovascular disease, may actually have a protective effect. The combination has no adverse effect in users 50 to 59 years of age and under 10 years since menopause. That's the bottom line. Now look at the all-cause mortality. If you look at all the trials published so far, observational meta-analysis, randomized trials, Bayesian analysis, Women's Health Initiative, reanalysis, Cochrane, you can see that the odds ratio in all of them is less than 1. So early that is in the younger age group, under 60. So early initiation is the key to the beneficial effects of estrogen. Does menopausal hormone therapy increase the risk of venous thromboembolism and stroke? Yes. The risk of stroke is increased, especially those who be irrespective of their own combination or otherwise. But the meta-analysis published in even 2015 have shown that the absolute risk is 6 to 8 per 10,000 per year. The additional risk is only 2 per 10,000 per year, which is really very insignificant. You could cross the road and be hit, your chances of being hit by a vehicle is way more than that. Venous thromboembolism, the risk increases in the combination group. There are 5 additional cases per 1,000 in the meta-analysis, and the risk is much lower with transdermal estrogen, micronized progesterone and dydrogesterone. In healthy postmenopausal women, the absolute risk is extremely low. Look at this picture which will show you that this figure shows you that the beneficial effects in blue are much higher than the harmful effects, all of which are under this dotted line. Can you see the red dotted line? That is 10 per 10,000, and all of them are below that, and so any adverse effect is insignificant, and you have a lot of beneficial effects in younger women with under 10 years since menopause. Now, there comes the timing hypothesis, which I have been talking about, that is the initiation of estrogen therapy under 60 years of age and less than 10 years in menopause has a beneficial effect on estrogen receptors, positive action on vascular endothelium, glucose metabolism, muscle breakdown, and brain functions. Look at this picture. If you look at the WHO study, 60%, 64% were included in the trial only at this stage, older age group, whereas only less than 30% or 30-odd% were at this stage, and that is why the results of WHA was skewed. Now, how about breast cancer? WHI and the collaborative group on hormonal factors in breast cancer together have, and several other studies have shown that there's no increase with estrogen alone, and with combination it is 8 per 10,000 after 5 years of use. So the younger women again are safe here. So in response to all the worries and anxieties of all the prescribers, in young women defined as under 60 years of age, please, cardiovascular disease risk is, there is a 30% reduction, stroke 2 additional cases per 10,000 per year of use, venous thromboembolism 2 per 1,000 at 2 years and 2 to 8 per 1,000 at more than 7 years, lower with transdermal estrogen, breast cancer 8 additional cases per 1,000 with the combination when used for 5 years or more. Risk is almost nil when it is used for less than that. All-cause mortality is lower by 30% in all the users. Please remember. So before prescribing menopausal hormone therapy, I hope that now we have all understood the need to prescribe menopausal hormone therapy to prevent long-term morbidity and increase the longevity of women. Now, what do? You have to evaluate for cardiovascular risk, we have to evaluate for the risk of osteoporosis, evaluate the risk of breast cancer, look for indication, rule out contraindication, and remember the special age groups which I have been repeatedly mentioning, premature ovarian insufficiency and early menopause. How do you evaluate the cardiovascular risk? You have a WHI ISH risk prediction score for India using all these parameters, and you could easily plot and know what the risk is. You can also use the risk cardiovascular score by ACC and American Heart Association. You can use any of those. And if the risk is low, go ahead with menopausal hormone therapy. Moderate, use transdermal. If the risk is high, avoid menopausal hormone therapy. Now, how do we evaluate risk of osteoporosis? You can use a FRAC score available. You can use the WHO score, OSTA score that is available, and they classify it as low, moderate, and high risk according to this score. And if you are under high risk group, you measure bone mineral density and definitely give them hormone therapy. If they are moderate risk, you measure BMD and decide, and if they are a low risk group, you only give them calcium and vitamin D. Now, breast cancer risk, you can use a Gale scoring, NCI or IBS scoring. Again, depending on the risk, you can decide on whether you can give them or not. So you proceed with hormonal therapy if they are young, under 60 years, under 10 years of menopause and low risk. You use with caution if they have any of the risk factors. And of course, if there are contraindications, use non-hormonal options. There are many other possible benefits that many of us are not looking at. Remember, there's a significant reduction in the diagnosis of new onset type 2 diabetes, reduction in abdominal adipose tissue and weight gain, protective effect on osteoarthritis. Many of our women come with this problem. If you give them at that window, it can reduce the risk and there is reduction in colorectal cancers and improvement in the quality of life. Now, how do you prescribe? You need to decide on the right estrogen, right progesterone, right regimen, right dose, right use, and right duration. I'm not going into any of those here. There are several public health challenges to the management of menopausal women. There is awareness and access to menopause-related information and services remain a challenge. Menopause is often not discussed in the families, communities. Nobody discusses. Everybody discusses diabetes, everybody discusses everything else, but no one wants to talk about menopause and its problems. Healthcare providers may not be trained to recognize these problems. Preventive management is a novel and emerging concept, and many governments do not have health policies or finances for this, and menopause currently receives very limited attention in the training curricula of undergraduates and postgraduates. WHO has responded to it by raising measures to raise the awareness at all levels and including menopausal management and training regarding menopause to healthcare workers and providing menopausal women access to health information and care. So I conclude by saying menopause is not cessation of menstruation or hot flushes anymore. The silent biological changes that increase the risk of non-communicable diseases must be assessed. The period of menopausal transition provides a window of opportunity to assess the health status, symptoms if any, risk factors for cardiovascular disease, osteoporosis and cancers. It's a pity that men don't have a window of opportunity and they don't come to you at that point in time to receive assessment and treatment. And I'm sure many women sitting here are wishing they did. This is the time for preventive management. This is the window for safe administration of menopausal hormone therapy. These have substantial consequences on the longevity and quality of life of women. Let us make use of this opportunity to understand and accept the changing concepts. Let us join hands to help our menopausal women, and this is where goeth we. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lakshmi.